Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Cuz You Don't Know Football? Today, guys, it's just about us today. I told you from time to time, it's just going to be us. We don't need all these other people. You see what I'm saying? Because we got that kind of connection together. You feel me? But we are finishing up the Can We Fix Them series. So of course, this one is the final of them. We're talking about the North, the AFC North and the NFC North. And in this one, it's like I said, it's just going to be us. And that's what I wanted to say. This one is actually after the draft. So I'm gonna kind of fill this in. I'm basically just going to say what I think the teams should have done in the draft as opposed to what they did, what they needed. We're still going to talk about what they got in the offseason, and then we're just going to do this. But it's not going to be, this episode is not going to be too long. We'll take it easy on y'all this one. All right. So the first one, we're going to start with the NFC North, and we're going to start with the Minnesota Vikings. So when I looked at the Vikings offseason, their biggest acquisition was actually getting Aaron Jones from their rival Green Bay. So they definitely got that. Of course they restructured. I saw they restructured Harrison Smith, their strong safety. They still got Jettas and everything like that. Going into the draft, I feel like the Minnesota Vikings are starting over. And anytime you have a team who's starting over, it's hard for them to kind of sometimes understand that they are starting over. So, they still think that they're fighting, and when they should be breaking something down, they actually still, they still try to do stuff. So that's here nor there. That's not my business. That's the GM of the Minnesota Vikings business. However, so they're, in my opinion, they're restarting, and in their draft, their first pick was a quarterback. It was JJ McCarthy. Now, once again, we talk a lot about, I tell you guys a lot about how I feel about quarterbacks and drafting them, and if they're not a top 5 pick, what should happen. I think this is kind of what happens when a team is restarting and they don't know that they're restarting. You take a quarterback who's the maybe 4th or 5th best quarterback in the draft, and you draft them earlier because you're like, that you need a quarterback. I think JJ McCarthy is the first person on my list that I think is going to be a bust. I don't think he has anything in his, well, let me say, he didn't show anything in college that said I can carry a team. And this team is now old, and it's now lacking talent around it, except for, of course, Jettis. We know that. I think if Jettis is smart after this year or whenever his contract is up, he does not re-sign with them, because I think he needs to get on to a greener pasture and try to get things situated there. But I kind of have the inclination through watching a couple things that they might be trading that pick. So, or not that pick, excuse me, trading Justin Jefferson for some picks, but we'll see what happens with that. All right, cool. So let's see who we gonna go to next. We did that. Nope, I'm gonna switch over to the AFC North. Let's go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, I think they definitely had an interesting offseason. Of course, they got a Patrick Queen from their rival, the Ravens. They got 2 quarterbacks. They got Russell Wilson, and they also got Justin Fields. So their quarterback room is pretty stocked. Now, they're a very interesting team. For me, with what I think that they needed, obviously, they needed offensive linemen. They got that in the draft. They got a couple offensive linemen. I actually really liked their draft. I don't know, in this division, like we talk about it, like, the AFC North, this might be the greatest division of all time. And that's the real truth about it. That claim has been stated before, but legitimately the Steelers could make the playoffs, or they could win the division, or they cannot make the playoffs at all. And that's for every team in that division. So it's kind of hard to see when it comes to that. Coming off a season last year, they were 10-7. I kind of think they're going to be in that same range again. I think they're better at quarterback, but is it so significantly better that it gets them an extra game? We'll see what the game plan is and everything like that. But you could pretty much expect it around the same number of wins for the Steelers. We just got to see what the rest of the division ends up happening. Let's jump back over to NFC. Let's talk about the Chicago Bears, man. Chicago Bears, of course, got Caleb Williams. They got Kevin Byard. They got DeAndre Swift. They got a lineman, Matt Pryor. They got Keenan Allen, of course. They brought in some people, and then, of course, in the draft, they got Caleb Williams and they got Rome Odunze. So for me, I definitely feel as though the Bears are the first team that I'm going to pick in that basically did not make the playoffs last year, that I'm expecting to make the playoffs this year. So I definitely see big things for them. I think Caleb Williams is going to be a future Hall of Famer. I think he's in a great situation. There's really never periods of time where you see number one overall picks go to situations where there's a ready-made roster for them. So he doesn't have to carry this roster. Their defense last year was actually pretty solid. And I actually really, really think that the Bears are going to be a playoff team coming this year. They're one of the teams that missed it last year. I think they're going to be in it this year, and I'm very excited to see what they do. You know what I mean? I think they're going to put a big strain on the NFC because wow, you know, that's what they got on their team. All right, let's bounce up to the Browns. So the Browns last year, they went through like four quarterbacks and ended up making the playoffs, still going 11-6 with Joe Flacco as a quarterback and that defense that was like all-time great. You know, that defense was immaculate. So they're bringing that back. And of course, they're getting on quarterbacks back, one big Deshaun Watson. I think the question mark for the Browns is more wrapped around what's Deshaun Watson going to do? Because if he can be the guy again, you know, they had a lot of injuries last year. Quarterbacks, they also had it with Nick Chubb. He'll be back as well. So now they found something in Josh Ford. I think their roster is good. They brought in Elijah Moore, or they had Elijah Moore, and they also got Jerry Jeudy from the Broncos to go with Amari Cooper. So I definitely feel as though if this is a hard team to look at, because if Deshaun Watson is great, this is a playoff team and they're a very scary team. If his best days are behind him and we're looking at that, then I don't know exactly where to put them. But in going into this draft, I think when you look at this roster, there's not much more you can do with this roster. I think they could have maybe used another wide receiver. But if they didn't, you know what I mean? They didn't, but like the fact that they didn't doesn't really change anything for them. Yeah, I think this is the most interesting team, honestly, I can remember, all because it's so much talent here, but we don't know exactly where they're gonna be. So we'll see. We shall see. We're going through this one. We pumping through this one, y'all. Pause. But we're pumping through this one. Okay, cool. The next pick I have, I got the 9-8. They shocked the league last year, making it to the playoffs and advancing. The 9-8 Green Bay Packers. Of course, Jordan Love came out last year and he balled out. He proved me wrong. Okay, I came back on here. Sometimes I come on here and I just apologize to people. And Jordan Love deserved an apology for what he did because that man was amazing. So let's look at this year. So they got their superstar quarterback. They need to pay him fast. So in the off season, they let go of Aaron Jones. They brought in Josh Jacobs. They re-signed AJ Dillon. They signed some offensive linemen. Okay. And then in the draft, they got a tackle. They got a linebacker, a safety, another running back, linebacker, safety. So I love the fact that they drafted so many tackles, because you got to protect that quarterback. Now that you know you're there, you got to protect that quarterback. I would have loved to see them invest a little bit more in terms of wide receivers, just because I feel as though, I mean, they signed wide receivers, but I feel like they could have invested more. But I think they're an interesting team also, just like Cleveland, but they could also miss the playoffs this year as well. But I don't think that changes anything, only because they know what they have. Some of these things they have to sit. I think they will be in the playoffs still, but somebody's going to fall out that you think is going to stay in. And after having a season like they did, getting to the playoffs, beating Dallas, advancing, I mean, it's kind of hard to see, but I think they'll be good in this season. All right, we kind of breezing through this. Let's going into the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, missed the playoffs last year. They went 9-8, and Joe Burrow was injured in the year. So in this offseason, Immediately they got a guard. They got Zach Moss actually from my Colts because they lost Joe Mixon. They signed Mike Gesicki. They re-signed Joe Browning, but then they exercised Jamar Chase's option, and then they drafted a tackle, a defensive tackle, another wide receiver, another defensive tackle, tight end, cornerback, tight end, and yeah. Oh, in their offseason, they also got a couple tackles as well. So I love the investment into their offensive line. I've said for years the Bengals are going to be held back because they did not invest into their offensive line. They're built incorrectly offensively, not as a whole team, but offensively they're built incorrectly. You can have all the weapons that you want. You can have the best wide receivers in the world. If your offensive line sucks, you're going to see it. And I'm looking at the trajectory of Joe Burrow's career and how great he is, and it's looking a lot like Andrew Luck's and how he's getting hit so much they're not taking that as seriously to protect him in that way. I mean, the man didn't he has the most sacks in one playoff game ever. And and they just said, "Oh, he won the game," instead of saying he got sacked 9 times in a game and then turned around and got sacked another like 7 the very next game. That's outrageous. The Bengals investing into their offensive line, I think they're going to be a team jumps right back into the playoffs. Like they didn't even miss a beat. So I'm very happy to be talking about them. This is going to be great for them. And I think for Joe Burrow, the future definitely improved. I'm very curious to see what they do with T. Higgins, but I think this is going to be good for them. All right, and then we'll get into the Detroit Lions, who have won a division title at 12-5 for the first time in, I want to say 25 years. I know Barry Sanders was there the last time they won a division, but they won a division, got to the NFC Championship game, which I predicted, and everybody called me crazy for that. And I predicted, and I told you they was going to the NFC Championship game, and they did. And and for about 3 quarters, it looked like they was going to go to the Super Bowl. But of course, the 49ers did beat them in that title game. The one thing that I felt like the Lions needed, because I think their roster is stacked like that. The one thing that I felt like they needed was another pass rusher to go on side of Aiden Hutchinson. They did not get that guy, and I'm actually a little sad for them that they didn't get that guy, because I think there's this roster, like all it needs is another pass rusher. It could have came in the form of a defensive tackle, it could have came in the form of a defensive end, but they needed one more pass rusher. And I felt like no matter whatever they did in the offseason, they didn't lose any pieces that they really needed to bring back, but a pass rusher is something that they needed. I'm actually very curious about what you guys think about this. But like for me, if you got one piece and that one piece is like a quarterback or a pass rusher, you gotta start to think, all right, we're gonna have to give this draft up to go get that player. And I really feel like they're one player away. You know what I mean? So of course I expect them to be back in the playoffs. I just am very curious to see where they go. You know what I mean? I'm very curious to see what game plan, how they scheme to have one pass rusher and figure out how to do that. Because I feel as though that's what the 49ers figured out. Oh, they only have one pass rusher. So that's the one thing. But I think they're going to be great this year. And then finally, on the AFC North, we have the Baltimore Ravens. They were 13-4 and also were in the AFC Championship game. I expect big things from the Ravens this year. Just like the Lions, what I wanted them to do is get a pass rusher as well. And I don't feel like they got the pass rusher either. I'm not getting why in the NFL today nobody is like taking it so seriously to get a pass rusher. I mean, the NFL is not that it's not that complicated. You get your quarterback, you protect them, you go get their quarterback. Everything else kind of is in my opinion secondary to those 3 things. So you got to get your quarterback, you got to get your offensive line, you got to get pass rushers. If you've accomplished that, you can even have holes in your roster and still get it done. So I expect them. I want to see the ceiling. I'm very excited to see what they do. I'm very excited to see what Lamar does. Now he's a 2-time league MVP. That puts him in rare air. So I'm very excited for that. So once again, guys, I want to thank you guys for tuning in on this shortened episode of Cuz You Don't Know Football. Check us out on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, full episodes, Spotify, YouTube. Baby, we all over the place. So until next time, Just like Martin said, I'ma see you when I see you. Peace.